So I'll start. Kia ora koutou. Kumusta po kayong lahat? Tulad ng sabi ni Ahmed, this is a continuation of what we have discussed last week and the previous week as well, because there are lots of questions and we want to talk about practical applications of all those concepts that we have learned. And we have some parents ask about why is my child behaving this way? Dati hindi naman siya ganon. So that's why for today we're going to be framing our workshop on the Montessori philosophy on children's development. Now, there are several theories on human development and education. So ito lang gagamitin nating framework. I know Ahmed shared something about Erik Erikson's theory last time on our group. This is just going to be a framework that we'll be using so that pwede nating ituloy-tuloy yung mga katanungan natin last time. Okay, so next slide, please, Ahmed. So we're going to be talking about developmental stages, or in Montessori, it's called the planes of development. So what are the critical stages of my child's life and how do I respond to that? So in these discussions we're going to have, I'll be setting out, the characteristics of the different stages, and then there will be some portions where we're going to be viewing some videos, and then there are some suggestions on what adults can do. And when I say adults, it's not only the parents, but teachers as well, the primary caregivers of the child. So next slide, please, Ahmed. So there are 4 planes of development. So we have the 0 to 6, which is infancy, and then 6 to 12, childhood, and then adolescence from 12 to 18, and then 18 to 24 for maturity. So if you're going to look at those 4 planes of development, 6 years siya ng 6 years. So in each stage, in each plane, yung first 3 years, that's where there is that big development happening. So yung tawag dito, yung diagonal line going to the right, that's where there is a massive development going on, and then the line going up, that's where there is a consolidating of what they have learned during the first 3 years. So for example, under infancy 0 to 3, there's lots of physical and psychological development going on. 3 to 6, they're making sense of what they have learned. So there's consolidation on that. And if you're going to look at the picture, merong naka-black, yung infancy tsaka adolescence, and then childhood and maturity, white. So the reason for that is from infancy and adolescence, there is a rapid change going on sa mga bata, physically and psychologically. So there are turbulent changes. That's why laging sinasabi, when you have your 13, your 12 to 18, it's just like having a baby again, because that's where they need lots of support in terms of their development. And then yung childhood and maturity, there are slow changes. So mas stable sila during that stage. So at age 0 to 3, it's called the absorbent mind. It's because children absorb everything, all their experiences, what they hear, what they see, what they taste, everything that they sense around them, they take it in. And that's why it's really important when it comes to language acquisition. Actually, dapat kung multilingual tayo, let's use all those languages, because ang bata, they just take it all in. They may not be speaking it, but actually they are just taking it all in, and later on in life, they'll be actually using that. And then age 3 to 6, it's all about becoming independent. It's the help me to help myself. And then 6 to 12, help me to think for myself. Age 12 to 18, help me to find my place in the world. So we'll be talking more about those stages specifically in the next few minutes. Next slide, please. Amen. And if you have any questions, what I want to do is for us to get through all these slides. So if you have questions, just write it down, or kung gusto nyo, lagay nyo na rin sa chat box, and then we'll have that open forum afterwards. Is that all good? Is that kapay? Yeah, cool. Okay, so for the first plane of development, so As I mentioned earlier, that's the infancy stage. And there is lots of physical and biological independence. So the mentality of the child during the time is, I can do it myself. And what they're actually telling us is, help me to do it myself, even putting their clothes on, feeding themselves. So for them, it's a learning journey of knowing what's going around them. They're very curious. So the question in their mind always is, what is that? Okay, next slide, please. Amen. So as I mentioned earlier on, 0 to 3, the first 1,000 days, Maria Montessori described this as a very crucial moment. The child's brain is just like a sponge. It absorbs everything, and it's a sensitive period for language, order. So children at this age really like their routine, especially from 3 to 6 as well. That's why are there lots of tantrums happening kapag nagbago bigla ang ating mga plano or hindi ito yung nakasanay bata, diba? Sleeping in the evening. So the order is actually all right. You go and wash up to get ready for dinner. After dinner, magtututbrush ka, and then we'll have a story and then matulog. So that is the routine that you do. And then one day you just decided, I'm not going to read you a story, matulog ka na. There are lots of crying. Why? Because the sense of order for that child is disrupted, and that's too much for them. I always say na sa preschool, for example, some parents say, I don't understand why he is crying so much, such a drama queen. And I said, is there something that changed this morning? Oh yeah, her dad went away very early because he has to fly out. Yeah, so she was not able to say goodbye to dad. That's already a big thing for the child. So for us as adults, we're not thinking about it, but for that child, there is something missing. You have disrupted my routine, and now you cannot understand why I'm crying. Why are you shouting at me? And all the more na napagalitan, lalong nagtatantrum. Okay. Again, it's that movement as well. So physical movement. So at this stage, it's the exploration stage for the child. And one thing that we have to remember for those who have very young children, minsan excited tayo, paupuin mo ang baby, when it's not yet ready, or even putting them on the tummy when they're not ready. It's not really helpful for that child. And Nathan Wallace will talk about that later on sa video clip. Sensory skills, social skills, that's very, very crucial for them. That's the development of that, because it's their first time to explore the world. So infants are really amazing because they were born not knowing what's happening around and all that, but they still survive, day by day, and then they discover a lot of things, and they accommodate and assimilate those in the environment. Jaja has put in here an article, can a pacifier affect my child's speech development? Yes, it's because at this age, language is really important for children. They are supposed to be talking, they're supposed to be blabbing, saying all those, opening their mouth. And if you're going to put the pacifier on them, that's stopping them from, exploring and developing language. So,
add ko lang.
Yeah, so, para sa atin na lagyan ng pacifier yan kasi sa tenga.
So may ibang research daw. Pagka baby pa, parang okay pa raw siya because it helps them soothe themselves. Pero pag after 6 months or 1 year na, tapos pinapacify pa rin yung mga bata, then it doesn't help with the language development because they want to explore. Even if we don't understand them yet, they want to explore using their vocal cords and different sounds. If nilagyan ng pacifier, then that really doesn't help. Pero pag baby pa daw, it's okay.
Yep.
Yun lang. So,
and it's important for them to actually hear themselves. And that's if you put a pacifier, then they won't be able to hear actually their own voice. Yun. And so the first 1,000 days of children are really crucial. And we're going to look at a clip by Nathan Wallace about this, the importance of the first 100 days of the child's life.
So bigyan ko lang ng introduction. Si Nathan Wallace is a neuroscientist na Kiwi. You may have seen him sa news kasi parati siyang ini-interview. At maraming beses siya na-interview lalo na nung lockdown with parents asking for advice kung ano gagawin sa bahay. And so yung view niya on developmental psychology and the stages of development of a human being is also very in line with Dr. Montessori. Kasi si Montessori trained as a doctor before siya naging teacher. And so the way that they look at it is also links with what Maria, kung naka-join kayo last week, yung ating guest speaker, si Maria Oloa, talked about the different parts of the brain and what that part is responsible for. So a lot of his research links scientifically to how the brain develops and how that affects the different ages. And so, yeah, he really emphasizes the first 1,000 days of the child's life, of an individual's life, pretty much sets you up for how successful you'll be in the future. So, yeah, Amit will play the link.
The reason why the first 1,000 days are so crucial is basically because we found out in the 1990s your outcomes aren't just determined by genes. In the first 1,000 days of your existence, the first 1,000 days being from conception to 1,000 days after that, your genes are interacting with the environment to see what sort of brain you're going to need for the rest of your life. So what can we do in that first 1,000 days to maximize that? Well, the research tells us the number one thing you can do is to have a parent stay at home in the first year of life. It's really just about you being present with your baby, interacting. Interaction is one of the most complicated things that the brain does. So the more that your baby gets of that in the early years, the better all their outcomes are. And it's not just interaction from anybody, it's interaction from people that have those close, dyadic, reciprocal relationships, people that the baby knows. Children learn to be resilient and deal with their emotions because basically they watch you doing it for the first 18 months of their life. The more they watch you calm and interact with them in the first 18 months, the better they'll be at calming themselves. So if we've got paternity leave and maternity leave, then I'd suggest taking all of that because the early years are so crucial. Maybe take it, there can be a need to take it both at the same time because you may need dad there supporting mum, or if possible, maybe taking it one after the other. So the baby's just staying at home for as long as possible with those crucial figures in their life, mum and dad. This will enhance the baby's health and well-being more than any other single thing that the research can identify. Major risk factors in this time, I think it can be stressed out parents. If the parents are really stressed out and not stopping, being present, interacting with the child, but just get into a logistical mode, the child's changed and bathed and put to bed, but there isn't time to stop, and in today's hectic pace, to stop and really connect with the child and interact. So that's one of the risk factors, just to be aware that that interaction is what drives your child's development, so make the time for that. Let the washing pile up, don't worry about the dirty windows, prioritise interacting with your baby in the early years. It's the early years that really count. One of the biggest risk factors facing parents in New Zealand is this unspoken competition that human development is a race. You go to an antenatal class and there's an unspoken competition over whose baby's going to walk first or who baby's going to talk first. I suppose there's one thing for parents to know clearly is that the child who walks first or talks first is not the child who gets the best outcomes. They're not earning any more money at 32. They're not, development's not really a race. It's more about the process. So try and give in to that temptation. Don't stand babies up early or put them into positions they can't naturally put themselves into. The key word for early childhood development is responsiveness.
There we go. Yeah, so yung sinasabi niya, responsiveness, and that's the key word for early childhood education. So Nathan Wallace also mentioned about, yung logistical issues among parents, because for us, for parents, for example, we have to earn a living, and so we have to put our children in early childhood centers. So what's really important is when you are looking for a place for your children in early childhood education settings, is you go and visit. Don't choose the closest to your place because it's easy. Choose a place, go and visit different places and look at the way teachers interact with children, how children interact with the children. and how adults interact with one another, because your children will be absorbing all of these in the environment where they are going to be. And that's really very important because they are developing a lot physically and socially as well. The way they interact is based on what they see around them. Yeah. So yung sinasabi rin niya na don't force children to do things that they are not yet ready to do. And how is that affecting life later on? It's because if you don't rush them, children actually learn to be patient and persistent. I want to go and play with the ball, but the ball is far away from me, for example. For a baby, ang tendency natin as adults is actually bibigay lang yung bola, di ba? Para gusto maglaro ng bata ng bola, malayo sa kanya, bibigay natin. We're actually taking away the opportunity for that child to develop his persistence and his patience and his ability to move around, and experiment with his movement so that he can go and get that ball. And that's why he's saying the child who walked first or who talked first does not necessarily mean that they're going to be successful later in life. It's because they haven't developed those, again, we're going back to those skills and dispositions needed in life. What else? Next slide, please. So the next slides are about at this age, where are they going to school? So what's happening, at 0 to 3, early childhood, and then age 3 to 6, they begin kindergarten. As we've already mentioned before, this is the sensitive period again for language. And now the reading is also starting to emerge. And then the sense of order again, repetition, internalization of skills learned. And that's why we always encourage children to actually practice the skill that they learn, because sometimes tayo nagawa ko na yan, ayoko nang gawin. But it's good to encourage them to keep practicing, to strengthen the knowledge or to refine the knowledge as well.
So add ko lang, and because they're really, yung sensitive period is sort of like, yan yung time na very susceptible sila to learn this particular skill. Kumbaga, sinasabi nila, if you're teaching a language, kailangan maituro mo na yan at age 0 to 6. Because, or ma-absorb nila yung language na yon between age 0 to 6, because it will naturally happen. After that, then mahihirapan ka. You really have to take time. They won't learn it naturally. Yung in terms of order and repetition, it's not just repeating skills that they learn at school. Importante dyan is having a set routine. Kung anong ginagawa nyo sa bahay, every day dapat ganyan. May oras for this, may oras for that. Hindi yung iba-iba yung oras ng tulog. So, because they're really sensitive to that order, pag may maiba lang dun sa routine ng bata, then that can cause, for some children, hindi masyadong obvious yung effect, but others, kitang-kita mo, may maiba lang yung gising, yung oras ng gising, or may iba lang na ginawa for this day. It really, really makes them upset. So, sobrang importante yung routine in that age group.
And then social skills, that's where they are learning. That they have what we call the terrible twos, but it's not actually terrible twos. It's actually an amazing journey, because this is the time that children are really learning how to play with others to develop their social skills. And so for adults, it's our responsibility to support them on how to do that. Hindi yung halimbawa pag tinulak yung anak natin ng isang bata, pagagalitan mo yung isang bata. Diba? And natural tendency natin yun, parang sinaktan mo ang anak ko. But actually, how can you make that situation a learning situation? For your children? It's actually engaging these two children to acknowledge what's going on, that somebody was hurt. And usually at this stage as well, for 2 years old, sometimes akala mo the child pushed another child kasi gusto lang niyang saktan yung bata. Actually, they want to play to each other, but they don't know how to engage. They don't know how to do it. And that's when we support them on how to do that. And that's when we have as adults, we have the language, we have the capacity to explain it to them, and that's our role during this crucial time. And the next, meron ka patagdag dyan?
Yung halimbawa, yung nagtulak, mahalagang bagay din yung i-acknowledge, kung naiintindihan natin kung ano yung gusto nilang gawin. Kasi often, pag nakita mo, ay tinulak, ay bad ka.
Yeah.
Pero actually, yung intention is, I want to make friends. I just don't know how to. So ito yung manifestation. And so if we say, we acknowledge yung need for them to make friends. We can say na, oo anak, alam ko gusto mo makipaglaro kay ganyan-ganyan, pero hindi tayo magtutulak. Instead of immediately saying, bad, wag, yung ganun, or yung nag-freak out ka, because then they'll feel na, I won't even engage with that other child kasi mapapagalitan ako. So, ganun. Which is mahirap gawin kasi at any age.
At any age, yeah. And for parents, syempre, your children are your precious ones and you don't want them to get hurt. But again, risk-taking is also important for children because life is full of risks as well. So we should allow them to experience that. And just in addition to what Jaja was saying, yun sa sensitive period, once you have missed that out, you can no longer go back to it. That's why you have to really nurture that. Yeah. Next slide, please, Ahmed. So these are the characteristics of the first plane. So you have that period of physical and spiritual construction. So when we say spiritual construction, it's not religion. It's all about, awareness of qualities such as respect, responsibility, reverence for self and others. It's that sense of peace and purpose. So it's them knowing about themselves as human beings and knowing about others. So that's developing beliefs around the meaning of life in connection to others. So because we're going to be using that word spiritual, in the next few slides. So it's all about that awareness about yourself and others. Yeah. And then another characteristic is the need to feel loved and protected. And then the mind doesn't choose for itself. It just absorbs everything. Because they only start to become conscious learners close to 5, 6, and then they become very, very conscious on the next stage. Period of adaptation to surrounding environment, and then development of ability to formally communicate, and then your coordinated movement. And that's why we say this is where there is that tremendous change happening during that stage. Spontaneous physical movement, use of sensory organs are important, and then work alone or in parallel. A lot of parents are asking at this age, especially from 2 to 3, bakit hindi, may kaibigan ba ang mga anak ko? Ba't hindi siya nakikipaglaro sa ibang bata? They are not yet at that stage, but what's important is they are playing alongside other children. It's what you call the parallel play. A lot of parents, especially among Asian families, parang laging sinasabi nila, parang outcast yung anak ko kasi walang gustong makipaglaro sa kanya. But actually, they are all in the same stage that they just want to be alongside. Yeah. And then the last one is the need for purposeful work. And that's where we call, it's the practical life. Last time sinabi ko sa inyo, pag gusto nyo magluto, ang mga anak nyo gusto ring magluto. Let's help you to do that. So you can set up, for example, kahit cutting carrots. Sige, maglaan ka ng konting carrot na ikakat niya dyan. Kakat man niyang malaki, maliit, acknowledge it, celebrate it, because that's what they need in helping develop their independence. Carrying their bags to preschool, for example. Minsan, para madali, tayo na lang kakarga. But we're taking away that opportunity for children to develop their independence and their sense of responsibility as well for their own selves. Clothing, for example, pants. At this age, it's not advisable that we let children use jeans. Kasi if you want them to do toilet training, tapos ang ipapasuot mo sa kanila may butones at may zipper, ang handami nun. If you're going to just let them use something with elastic or garter, when they're doing, if they're doing toilet training, madali sa kanilang tanggalin yung pantalon nila. And so it doesn't become a fight when it's toilet training kasi you're allowing them, you're setting them up for success. So when you're giving them something to do, make sure it's according to their capability, and at the same time, ang tawag dito, medyo konting push. There are some things, for example, putting their jacket on. Minsan, jacket. Sige, lagay natin jacket mo, ako na lang para mas madali. But break it into steps. because that's how they can develop their sense of responsibility for their own well-being. So jacket, for example, zipper, lagay mo lang yung sa zip, you let it, stick together and let them pull it all the way up. Or kung hindi, magtira ka lang ng 1/4 and then let them pull it all the way up. For them, that's already a thing. That's a successful event for them already. I was able to zip my jacket. Yeah, it's really interesting at this age. You'll see the children, you'll hear them say a lot of times, I did it myself. Yay, I did it myself. And then that's when you really celebrate it, that they're able to do lots of those things. So there are more suggestions on the next slide on what adults can do. So at this stage, role model, being the best role model for your child. So if you want your child to be respectful, are you being respectful to the child? Are you being respectful to the people around you? So what they see is what they're going to show you. What they hear is what you're going to hear from them. Well, what you say is what you're going to hear from them. So it's all about that role modeling. And then the second part, the second one is being patient all the time, because it takes a long time for children to do. For us as adults, ang dali-dali lang maglagay ng sapatos, para sa atin madali yan, but for a child, that's a big job. And even the way we talk to the children, etong pagsasalita ko na to ngayon, for them, that's already 10 times faster. So when we are giving them, you're asking them to do something, you ask them to do one thing at a time and then talk slower. Kasi di ba, ang tendency natin is, dahil nagmamadali na tayo at hindi ka nakikinig, actually hindi niya na-process kasi ang dami-dami mong sinabi. So breaking it down. So art of patience and really follow the child, and that's really observing the child. So is the child ready to roll already on his or her tummy? So are you giving the child the space to actually do the rolling? If the child is actually very active, especially at the age of 2, they really want to be exploring the outside environment because they are exercising these new muscles that are developing in their body. Are we allowing them to do that, or are we just staying inside the house? And that's why going outside is really important at this age, because you're supporting their physical development and their psychological development too. And then support the need for independence. As I've mentioned earlier, practical life skills, putting away their dishes, wag mong gawin lahat para sa kanila. If you want your child to grow to be a responsible adult at a young age, give them responsibilities. Because if you're just going to expect them to do that when they're teenagers, you are already losing the battle. Yeah, and then ensure safety and security for them. So there will be lots of pushing boundaries at this age, because children are able to explore more as they grow older. They can run, they can already do climbing and all that. What's really important for us is to ensure that they are safe and they are in a secured environment. Yeah. And I've put in there grace and courtesy. It's all about, again, it's all those role modeling the values and the attitudes that you want your child to develop.
Okay.
At si Ate Mayi, Jaja, baka mayroong inputs ang ating mga parents, because since we're talking about adults' role, so if you have something to share, you can just to give you a heads up, if you have something to share, you can type it into our chat box, or you can raise your hand and then we'll give you the floor to give us some share to us some of your experiences or something that that maybe you can tell everyone, so that we will all learn. Kasi mas maganda rin na meron tayong what do you call this one? Meron tayong learning from co-parents who are actually experiencing some stuff with their children. Okay po. So
Thanks, Ahmed. I just saw something yung risk with natural and logical consequence. Yeah, that's really important. Kasi, for example, these children, they are exploring crossing the road, for example. There is a lot of risk involved in that. But we have to make sure that the child is in a safe environment. So when we allow them to explore risk, we make sure that we have all the sinasabi nga natin, risk management as adults. That's our responsibility. But not stopping them to climb a tree because it's risky. If they are climbing a tree, for example, so you talk to them about, just tell them, climb up to where you are comfortable. You can still come down, so they allowing them to explore that. And then the next day could be higher and higher. Are you still comfortable in doing that? Yeah.
Add ko lang sa school namin,
Meron.
tinalian namin yung mga puno ng orange ribbons. This is just in the past couple of years kasi na-notice namin ang daming nadidisgrasya. Especially primary school, they really want to test their limits. Ang tataas ng mga puno. Iba-iba yung yung rules in each school. Yung dating school kung saan ako nagtuturo, climbing trees not allowed.
Yeah.
Pero di ba parang lahat naman tayo ng bata umakit ng puno at alam natin masaya yon. So at least sa school namin ngayon, meron lang orange na
May
ribbons.
limits lang.
And we say, you can't go past that. Ganon.
We have Ate Judith Salamat who raised her hand. Maybe I think she got a question or something to share.
Yeah, okay. So, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, opo.
Yeah. So, ito hindi ito sa infancy, Mai, kaya lang dahil kinol yung attention ng mga parents ni Ahmed. So, what I can share with you as a parent, ang mga anak ko po ay malalaki na 18 and 20, nearly 27. But ang natatandaan ko yung sinasabi ng tatay ko noon, not actually condescending, him, but nung bata pa ako, palagi niya sinasabi, oh, wag kayong magsisigarilyo, ha? Ako lang. Tapos tatanungin ng mga anak, yung mga kapatid namin lalaki, bakit kami hindi pwede? Ikaw nga, nagsisigarilyo, yung ganon. Tapos, kaya inom. Ay, ako lang. Kasi parent ako o kaya magulang ako, kayo, anak namin. So, hindi pwede. So, parang, in a way, unconsciously, parang mali,
That's
no?
true.
So,
Yes.
yeah. So, number one yun na example na parang, yun nga, role modeling, no? Pangalawa, yung sa educational system natin sa Pilipinas na most of the grasses or lawns are having this label, keep off the grass.
Keep off the grass.
Oo, di ba? So lalo na pag talagang kailangang well-trimmed kasi may magdidisita ng mga alam mo na, yung mga high officials ng education. So, oo. So parang questionable yun sa akin, lumalaki ako. Bakit keep off the grass? Hindi na kami makakapaglaro doon. So, yung dalawang examples lang na yun na kumbaga sa mali doon sa role modeling role ng
Parents.
Salamat.
Thank you po, Ate Judith.
Magandang segue po yung example ni Ate Judith sa susunod na plane of development.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect siya na introduction eh.
You want to talk about that, Ja? Ja.
We have another, okay lang ba, Ate Mai, Jaja? We have another one who raised her hand, Cecil.
Yep, may question lang ako kasi it's really a bit funny dahil meron akong narinig na isang bata nagtanong kasi we're talking and then tinawag namin yung pangalan ng mom niya sa name. Then all of a sudden yung bata tinawag din yung mommy niya dun sa name niya. So sabi ng mommy, bakit mo ako tinatawag sa pangalan ko? Tapos sabi niya, you should call me mom. Tapos sabi ng bata, bakit daw siya tinatawag sa name niya? So hindi daw ba pwedeng tawagin din yung parents sa name nila? Kasi tinatawag natin sila sa name nila. So how are you gonna deal with that thing? And how would you explain it correctly to the kid? Kasi nga naman, kung iisipin mo, bakit mo ako tinatawag as my name? Bakit hindi kita pwedeng tawagin as your name? Bakit mommy lang or daddy lang? Di ba? So it's a bit funny pero gusto kong bigyan ng magandang paliwanag yung bata about that, especially if it is like 6 years old or 5 years old, di ba?
Actually,
So
ano
paano
siya,
po yun?
pwedeng maging challenge siya kasi dito sa New Zealand, meron din silang first name basis, di
First
ba?
name.
Oo.
Yeah.
So, paano po yun?
Yeah.
Tama, next question.
Sa akin siguro, just I think we need to make the lines quite clear that I am a parent, I'm not your friend. So I can be very good to you, but as a parent, I provide for you and I do all my best for you, but that doesn't mean we are equal. For one thing, I'm already older than you. Yes, you can call your name, your friends by their names, but at home, especially if you want to inculcate a bit more of our culture sa ating kultura, that's how we show respect to our parents. Tinatawagan natin yung mga matatanda sa atin, kuya, ate, tito, tita, not directly their first name because that's how we show respect to other people. So yeah, that's always one of the minor thing yun, Cecil, but this is one of the many dilemmas that children as well as parents face being in a Western New Zealand society that we are in, and we have to be very clear where we stand. Kasi pwede nilang, they can argue with you. At lalo na at a young age of 6, it's good to be very clear of that because if they go to 10, 11, 13, sabi nga ni Mai, you'd be at the losing end of the battle. I hope nasagot ko yung tanong mo, Cecil.
Yeah, thank you, Kuya Joey.
I think by age 4, once they start understanding yung mga so yung social relationships and then yung hierarchies, naturally they will, siguro age 2, 3 kailangan mo i-model. Kasi naalala ko nung bata ako, may yaya kami, tawag namin Ate Inday. Yung anak niya kaedad namin, tinatawag na siyang Ate Inday. 2 years old yun yung bata. So lahat kami, sabi nung nanay ko, tawagin si Ate Inday na nanay. Para yung anak niya tawagin siyang nanay. Yun yung ginawa naming lahat. So natutunan niya tawagin siyang nanay. But around age 4 and 5, well, developmentally, as adults, we want to expect na naiintindihan na nila yon. So pag naipaliwanag mo na, ako is mommy, you call me mommy, yung iba, this is what you call them, tita, or ganyan. Pag hindi pa nila yun naintindihan, then I'd worry about the child, hindi neurotypical yun eh.
Yeah.
Pwedeng may autism or pwedeng there's something na hindi niya naiintindihan yung social cues, hindi niya nakukuha yan naturally. Then there's something, hindi na yan within the bell curve eh. Kung at 5, 6, 7, ganun pa rin yung bata, there is something na deeper yung root issue kung bakit ganun yung tawag niya sa nanay niya.
I think good ano yun, point, as well as yung point ni Ate Judith na sumusunod lang yung mga bata sa naririnig nila. So siguro tinatawag yung first name dahil baka sa bahay yun ang tawagan ng mag-asawa. O Chiba, magluto ka na. Ganyan. So ikaw naman Joey, gawin mo na ito. So, they're just hearing these things and they're going to do that or act it out based on what they've heard from home, as mentioned mo, Cecil, maybe from their friends. They're trying to explore things like that too. Kasi yung naririnig nila sa friends nila.
One of the strategies that I use at school is for that is actually acknowledge that's right. You heard Joey call me Mai, or for example, let's just use TJ. TJ is Joey's son. So that's right. I heard your dad call me Mai, but you call me Tita Mai because I am older than you. Yeah, so it's acknowledge that, kasi sabi niya, bakit sinabi mo yun? Na tinawag mo lang siya ng Mai, parang ganyan. And at the same time, it's also just saying the relationship, for example, but she is your mom, so you call her mom. She's not my mom, so it's just making it a little bit playful. But what's important there is the acknowledgement of what the child has understood and then explain why. Yeah.
Thank you po. Okay, so should we go to the next slide po?
Yep.
May question pa. Yeah.
Atong comment ni Ate Judith is just about saying an example.
Yun
Why do you call tatay? He's your husband, not your father. But in our way, it's just thinking of language imitation, which is, I think, consciously ginagawa ng mga parents, lalo yung mga young parents. Kasi kami ng ni nanay. Kaya tawagan namin ngayon nanay and tatay. Kasi yun ang gusto naming ma-pick up ng anak namin na itawag sa amin when she, yung matutunan niya yung language imitation. And eventually, yan, tawag niya sa amin nanay and tatay.
Yeah.
And
Ayun.
it's also explaining that that's right, siya ang tatay ng tahanan natin. Kaya tawag ko rin sa kanya tatay. You know, so it's all about those roles and responsibilities sa bahay, which is, you know, in the Western world, hindi siya ganoon kaklaro, unlike sa atin. So it's also saying, tulad nga yan, so maybe you can hear your friends just call their mom, you know, by their name, but here in our house, we're going to use this. So in any event, kasi minsan, halimbawa, yung rough and tumble play, for example, may mga bata na they do rough and tumble play sa school na to the extent na kakasakitan na, and then they say, but I do this at home.
We
You know,
don't do it at
my
school.
daddy at home. It's like, you can do that at home with daddy, but not here at preschool. So it's setting the boundaries as well.
Yep.
You know, for them.
So I'll move on to the next slide.
Salamat. So, ang second plane of development po, yan na yung pagpasok ng primary school. Dito sa New Zealand, primary school starts at age 5. Pero yung age 5 is what you call the new entrant class. So yung curriculum niya na you approach yung teacher is very much like prep sa atin sa Pilipinas. So hindi siya talaga yung official primary age years. Kaya siya ginawa ng New Zealand na mag-start at age 5 is also para makatch kung sino man yung may kailangan na tulong or support at age 5 at ma-prepare well. So prep nga siya, prep. So second plane is usually around 6 to 12-year-olds. So next slide po. Salamat. Yan yung tinatawag na mental, that's the age for mental independence. Kaya at that age, siguro age 6, parati na lang nyo maririnig, bakit ganyan, why do I have to do this, how is it this? And even as they get older, let's say 9, 10, 11, or 12, sa school itatanong, is this compulsory? Why do we need to learn this? Lahat na lang tinatanong. And for us, it can come across as rude, because diba, gusto mo na lang sabihin, kailangan mong gawin yan because I said so. But actually, to them, they want to understand what's behind it, what are the reasons for that particular activity or kung ano man yung ginagawa nila. So yun yung maganda at this age. Next slide po. Thank you. So ito yung age na sinasabi ni Maria Montessori. It's because they've passed through yung reconstruction of the brain. At this age, yan na yung best time to really teach them. And mapapansin nyo, ang sipag ng mga bata pag ganyang edad, parating gustong may ginagawa, kahit hindi mo, most of the kids, kahit hindi mo bigyan ng homework, parati yung busy, nagsusulat, may ginagawa, nag-experiment sa bahay kung ano-ano yung ginagawa. Parati silang busy. Because it's really the time na you can give them everything and they're excited. They are excited to learn it if you've given them just enough, yung hindi naman overload. So, at this age, independent na sila physically. So, mas maririnig mo is, friends. Pag kunyari umuwi sa bahay yung bata, itanong mo, oh, how's school? Anong isasagot? Kung anong nangyari sa playground, kung anong ginawa ni BFF, or inaway ako ni ganyan, may nagkukwento ba sa inyo na, oh, yung inaral namin sa math is addition with exchanging. Meron ba ever nakarinig ng ganon sa bahay? Usually is, yung playground. Or,
DJ.
Si DJ, very good. Usually friends. So pag ganyang age, parang mas nagsa-start na talaga sila to distance themselves from the family unit, and dyan na din yung age na, oh, can I have a play date with ganyan? Or sleepover. Ano bang age? Mga siguro 8 years old, meron na nag-a-ask na sleepover. Yung iba, mas bata pa eh. So, sobrang importante sa kanila yung social interaction. And then, physically, yan, hindi na mukhang baby, mukhang talagang bata, pwede na sa sports. And that's why, by senior year is year 4, nagko-compete na, mas marami na talagang sports na ginagawa yung mga bata and nagko-compete na with other schools or regionally. And then, yung previous age group, the preschool age, sensitive sila to order. Kailangan physically yung environment nila maayos. Kaya minsan, alam mo, pag preschool pa lang kasi may pagka-OCD, yung minsan pati mga maliliit na mga napupulot nila kung saan-saan ibibigay nila sa'yo. And then, maiinis sila pag makalat. Opposite naman, pagka 6 and up, parating makalat yung environment. But they're still sensitive to order. Yung order na kailangan nila is all intellectually. So, kailangan, sobrang importante yung time management, tuturuan mo sila gumawa ng simple na schedule sa bahay, or yung oras, yung tuturuan mo, at yung calendaring, kung paano gumamit ng calendar, yung mga ganun. Kasi lahat ng they have that need to understand order in a more mental and abstract way instead of yung okay lang na makalat yung ano nila, yung environment nila, pero they have to understand how things work, yung ganun ba? Kaya yung mga toys na building toys, construction toys, yung mga experiments, or yung mga Lego, yung mga ganong klaseng toys, perfect yan for that age group because it helps them really explore their environment. Sobrang adventure na rin yung mga bata. So minsan nga yan yung age group na mas magaling pa sila sa atin. Kasi pag once they decide to do something, then they will really, if given the opportunity, they'll go for it and they will practice that skill over and over until ma-master nila because they really want to. Now, yung sinasabi kanina ni Ate Judith, yung sense of justice, sobrang importante sa kanila yan, yung double standard. So, yung age group na yan, kailangan talaga you have to lead by example. Because pag kinwestiyon nila, bakit ikaw ginagawa mo yan, ako hindi ko pwedeng gawin. Even if hindi verbally i-express yan ng bata, in their head, hindi, it just causes confusion eh. Parang hindi ko magets bakit ikaw umiinom ka or nagayosi ka, bakit ako hindi. Or yung simple rules, like for example, sa classroom ko, bawal magsapatos. Meron kang indoor shoes, may outdoor shoes, iiwan mo sa rack. Eh minsan ako teacher, nakakatamad tanggalin yung sapatos ko, lalo na kapag malamig. May sumisita sa akin parati na bata, Jaja, you have to remove your outdoor shoes, ganyan. And then, ako alam ko na, yeah, actually, I have to because, di ba, that's your rule. And adults shouldn't be an exception to the rule. Well, syempre may mga exceptions yan kasi there are certain things na ginagawa ng adult na hindi ginagawa ng mga bata. Then you have to be able to make them understand bakit may mga limitations sila at bakit may rule for this age group, bakit may rule for that age group. So, sobrang importante yun sa kanila. And then, it's also the time where they really worship people. May mga idols sila, may mga diba, they look up to people, they look up to others as role models. So this is the age na maganda talagang i-expose sila not only to yung people na nakikita nila sa TV or celebrities, but reading to them about lives of different people. Sobrang powerful yan at that age, even if hindi natin napapansin. Siguro kayo, may memory kayo as a child na may binasa kayong book or about someone that really, that you really were able to empathize with and to identify with, because this is the age when they're beginning to develop their self-identity, and that continues on until adolescence. And so as adults, next slide po.
Just ano lang po, may input dito si Sis Michelle Bustamante. So, Sis Michelle, do you want to where are you, Bustamante?
Share some.
Okay lang bro, I'm listening.
Okay.
As well.
Sabi niya, explaining to our children is very helpful. It helps them to understand the situation, what we want them to learn from us, or lead them by example. Oo. Kasi pagka nagtanong sila, bakit? We can't just say, because I said so.
Yeah.
That's not a good enough reason. They have to understand the why and the how behind this particular decision.
Yeah.
And once they understand that, it's easier for them to accept and see the good and the bad and see, and it also helps them make their own decisions. Because if we don't explain that, then hindi din sila matututo to make decisions for themselves.
Just to share an experience with our daughter. Dito rin namin nakita yung change sa behavior niya. Dati, yung hindi siya ma-observe sa mga anak nyo at an early age, 0 to 5, well, parang hindi siya marunong ng anger, na emotion. Pero at this stage, starting niya mga 6 years old, doon na namin siya nakitaan ng marunong na siyang magtawag nito yung mag-cringe pag ayaw niya, o kaya kapag pinagsasabihan mo siya, nakikita mo na yung facial reaction niya na parang may doubt or may question or parang may something. Yun, just to share.
Thank you, Ahmed.
Let's continue.
Next slide po, ayan. So, yung sinabi nga natin, meron parang subplane. From 6 to 9, yan pa yung junior primary shift from junior school to senior school. And then from 9 to 12, yan na yung heading towards intermediate school. So, preteens. Now, si Nathan Wallace, neuroscientist, sinasabi niya na sobrang crucial ang age around 11. Yung preteen age is even it's as crucial as teenagers. We often disregard yung age na between 9 to 12 because hindi pa sila as expressive as teenagers. Teenagers, sasabog ka kung sasabog ka. Yung preteens, hindi pa eh. Pero yan yung preparing to become a teenager. And for females, for the girls, mas mabilis ang development physically because at age 9, pwede ka na magka-period. And so, may changes na rin yan in the body. And that's why, sa primary school, senior school, pinag-uusapan na yung sex education. Pero ang focus lang is, how does your body change between 9 to 12, yung before ka maging teenager? Kasi yan na nga age na pwede ka na magka-period eh. So pinag-uusapan na, despite of your body changes, there will also be some mood changes. And despite that, diba, you have to be able to control or be able to express your emotion in a positive way. So ganun yung mga tinuturo eh. And then, pinag-uusapan din namin, you have be comfortable with yourself as who you are and find someone that you can trust na makakausap mo. And you know that these changes, maiintindihan yan ng parents mo, always go to them to talk to them about these. And so yan, at senior school, we talk about that already, about the changes that will happen soon to their body kasi preteens and how that's going to affect their moods and how it's so important. Kasi pag pasok ng teenage years, problema ang peer pressure. So at that age pa lang, you have to set them up for what's going to happen next in the next stage of their life. At that age pa lang pinag-uusapan na just because your friends do this doesn't mean that you have to. Diba? You stay grounded in what you've learned at home and at school, what your parents have taught you, stay grounded and don't just say yes and don't just follow whatever your friends do. So pinag-uusapan na yan at that age. So as our role, I guess I've touched on that. Yun yung mga important conversations that we can have with them. Encourage them to be responsible. And ito yung hindi natin in-include dito sa usapan na to, pero yung money, teaching them how to use money. Merong pumupunta sa schools na tinuturuan yung mga bata how to budget or what the value of money is. And I think I'll ask those families, ano bang ginagawa ng iba't ibang families meron to teach their children about managing or the value of money or finances. Meron bang gustong mag-share?
Because it's at this stage, isn't it, Ja, that they knowledge about finances, understanding of money and tangible goods. mga rewards and all that.
Yung iba kasi like sa amin, yung mga nakausap kong parents, nagkaroon kaming workshop about this. May pumupunta kasi sa schools, yung ASB, meron silang program teaching primary school kids about the value of money. And then ina-encourage din nila yung families to teach the kids. So meron, iba-iba din yung ginagawa per family. Like may set chores na may bayad. Pero ayaw mo naman na lahat ng chores babayaran mo kasi baka maging tamad na yung bata. Ay, hindi ko gagawin yan unless binayaran ako. So I guess meron din yung meron silang allowance for the week, may sarili silang piggy bank or something, merong way of saving their own money. And so it's just one way of sort of helping them to become more responsible.
Okay, hi Ja. Mayroon atang question or i-share si Cecil?
Yes, you're very welcome.
Thank you. Yung sa chores nga kasi dati yung anak ko kapag halimbawa yung mag-aalis lang yung mga magtutulong lang magsampay sa akin, magsampay ng damit or mag-fold ng clothes. Meron siyang parang list na ilalagay. Tapos nilalagay niya ng amount like 50 cents or $1. Tapos after that, ayun, natuto siya na kung paano para at least nararamdaman niya na katulad natin as a worker na meron nag-earn siya pag may ginagawa siyang task. So parang same principle na in-explain ko na kung bakit nag-work si mommy at si daddy kasi para to pay our power bill or internet. Galing simpleng input lang sa bata. So natuto siya. Kaya yun lang yung i-share ko.
Salamat sa pag-share, Cecil.
Thank you, Cecil.
Sorry, Amedim. This is where the difference between want and need comes in as well. You know, some children, we provide for their needs, but they want something else. So you work for what you want, and that's where it can come in as well. You want to have a new PlayStation. What can you do to save up for it?
That's right.
Those are some strategies here.
Meron tayong share, I think, a question or something to share from Michelle Bustamante.
Yes, sa akin po is yung I have 11-year-old, and then syempre sa yung talagang kino-convince niya kami to allow him to play online games. If he asks me, I will always say no, but always saying no to your child is also not good.
That's true.
And also, and the other part din doon is, sabi kasi niya is, na-outcast siya sa class nila or sa school with the friends kasi wala daw siyang ika-share sa topics nila about the online game. So, parang out siya. So, sabi niya, Mom, it's the best way for me to make friends with the other students para doon na maging ka-close niya. Kasi very socialized na bata. And then, kaso lang, sabi ko sa kanya, is there any other good game kahit online para to continue that socialization with your other friends at school? So sabi niya, no ma'am, there's no other, only Fortnite. But for me, if he asked me, I really don't like Fortnite. Oo, nakaka-affect talaga sa mental nila, di ba? Especially at that very young age, 11 only. So, yung sa akin lang talaga, pinanghahawakan ko talaga to manage that situation is yung being consistent to explain. Yeah. So aside from being consistent sa explanation mo para maintindihan ng bata, kasi talagang natitempt siya eh. So is there any other advantage way para for me to help to manage that situation?
I think tama na yung ginagawa mo. And I guess to emphasize na our family is different from every other family. So ang i-share ko din na example is meron kaming family sa class ko na talagang zero screen time sila. Especially nung younger. Pero ngayon meron na siyang college. Merong college, may intermediate school, tapos yung bunso nila is year 6. Nung nag-intermediate school na yung panganay, saka lang sila talaga nag-introduce ng screen time. And they're only allowed an hour a week. So, even when we had lockdown, hindi yon everyday nagjo-join yung anak nila eh. Because marami naman silang activity sa bahay, and then they provide them a lot of other opportunities to so that hindi sila nabobore. So I guess yung malaking tinanong ko, how do you do it, because it's so hard. We all face it na, 'di ba? We are very much a screen culture. And ang hirap yung peer pressure niyan sa kids, lalo na if others are allowed to play games na violent at
Yeah.
that age.
Especially weekdays, di tayo makakaalis ng bahay para i-enjoy sila sa labas, di ba? Parang mahirap na situation.
So, yeah, mahirap na situation siya. So, I guess, pwede mong payagan ng ibang games, and then may mga, ano ba yung mga ibang games? Like
Whatever.
Minecraft, Roblox, yung mga may games naman na hindi violent.
Yeah.
So,
That's what
pwedeng,
I'm going to
yun
suggest.
yung, you're gonna have to research that, what are the other games that these kids are playing, and then explain to your child na, okay, we can come up with a compromise nga na, okay, allowed ka to play these games at this time, ganyan, or weekday or weekends, ganyan, or yung ganon. And then, may need din sila to use digital technology. So, pwede mo silang i-allow to do that. Like, ang daming apps ngayon sa iPad na, like, may stop motion app, pwede ka gumawa, or yung mga short movie app. Kasi like yung kids na yon who had no screen time, napaka-creative. May ginawa na stop motion video out of yung mga stuffed toys nila. Tapos ang galing, gumawa siya ng mga series na ganyan sa loob ko pag ginawa yung YouTube na kikita yan eh. Ang galing. So, something like that. So, it's one way. And then, you can, pagka, let's say, gumawa siya ng sarili niyang stop motion video, you can share that with the teacher and say, you can share this with your classmates. And so, it's also one way to promote yung socialization na he won't feel na, or she won't feel na, masyado naman akong left out kasi I don't get to do these things. And so, minsan, that age talaga, mahilig sila sa technology. And because technology is really a good tool, to learn other things. And so, you can provide that in different ways. Yun nga, through the use of, we have to know, though, what's helpful or what's educational compared sa yung screen time lang.
Okay, so we go to the third plane of development. So we had physical and mental phase, and now we go to the emotional. And this is, lots of questions were coming up about this last time. So on the third plane of development, if you notice again, it's in black. So that's the turbulent stage again for our children now as they grow up. So the amount of time that we gave them on their first 3 years, yan na naman ang kailangan nila at the age of 12 to 18. So this is the time wherein they are very vulnerable. They're called vulnerable souls, and it's because they are in their journey of finding who they are, as a person, as a part of the world. And also their mantra is actually, I can stand on my own. That's what they are developing. It's all about emotional independence. Next slide, please, Ahmed. So in the school settings at age 12 to 15, that's when they go to intermediate or college, and the brain goes through a reconstruction phase. Because on the second phase, it's actually it's all about that mental development for them. It's all about the thinking skills. When you go to this age, that shuts down. So the thinking brain is closed for repair, and then it's the emotional and survival brain that is already on hyperdrive. And this is at the stage wherein it's preparation for them to be able to function in society as part of the society. And then from age 15 to 18, that's a transition to higher education. So it's all about more social responsibility for them. And then we'll be looking at those characteristics on the next slide. And then we'll be watching a clip as well from Nathan Wallace. And then we'll just go through all those characteristics first and then watch, and then we'll have a discussion. Yeah. Next slide, Ahmed. So these are the characteristics of the third plane. They're called the vulnerable souls I've mentioned before, because there is that irregular flow of 4 months. Jaja already mentioned from the age of 9 to 12, there are already those physical changes and hormonal changes, pero mas mataas siya pagdating ng age na to. And then there is that erratic growth spurts for our children. And so there is that confusion. Am I, it's a confusion whether am I still a child or am I already an adult?
Yeah.
Here. And then there is, because of all these regular flow of hormones and physical development, actually, you'll notice they become clumsy as well. And there is that lack of coordination. And they are extremely sensitive, very, very sensitive. Meron ka lang masabing konti, galit na, or you use the same language the previous day, okay lang sa kanila. So it all depends on their mood during the day. And they develop yung strong emotional feelings. And what's important for them during this time is also the sense of belonging and contribution that's being valued. And then closer friendships, and then they express themselves through fashion. This is where they experiment on fashion, hairstyle, pananamit, and
Yeah.
sometimes you tell them, bakit ganyan, ang ikli ng shorts mo, and it becomes a source of conflict sometimes for them. Yeah.
Add ko lang, because this age is when they really, it's when they form their identity. So identity, self-identity is like the major theme of their lives. And that's why, it's a stage where they experiment. They want to be different from other people. They want to be individual. Or they just ayaw nila mapansin. Yun din yung age na gusto ko na lang mag-disappear kung pwede na lang na lumakad ako sa isang room at walang makita sa akin. I don't want attention. So either you can have those extremes as well, because it's yun nga yung sinabi ni Mai na that age group is, it's between childhood and adulthood. And so yan yung talagang, what am I going to be when I'm an adult? That's where they're trying to process all of that. On top of yung brain nag-shutdown, yung frontal lobe is under reconstruction. And so yung emotional part, tsaka yung movement part, yung part ng brain na nagpo-control ng emotions and movement, yun yung gumagana. And so kaya it looks like it's a really turbulent time of their lives, ang teenage, especially the early teenage years. And yeah.
And that's when the parents like, anong nangyari sa anak ko? That's when you have all these parents, anong nangyari dun sa aking napakalambing na anak ngayon? Everything is a source of conflict with my child. And it's because they are in that stage of, I want to express my independence. I want to express my own identity, discover my own identity, but I'm not very sure on how I'm going to go forward about this, or I'm not very sure what's right, what is wrong in terms of these choices. Yeah.
Kaya sinasabi dyan may decrease in intellectual capacity, because physically, the brain is under reconstruction. And so, I guess what's important is for us to understand na scientifically, yan yung nangyayari sa body and sa brain nung bata or nung adolescent, ng young adult that's in that stage. And so, yung worst na characteristic nila, yung pinakamalala nilang ugali, let's not focus on that, because they're gonna, di ba, if we do it right, maano nila yan they'll be able to get over that hump. And si Nathan Wallace always says na their best characteristic as an 11-year-old is what you want to focus on, because it determines what kind of a teenager they're going to become. And what they are as a teenager doesn't necessarily mean that's what they're going to be when they're adults. Because lahat naman tayo siguro dumaan sa teenage years. At ako, oh my God, ikahihiya ako yung teenage years ko. And if I'm only looking at that, lahat ng tao nagugulat, teacher ka ngayon? Sino mga binabrainwash mo ng mga bata? And so it really isn't an indication of what your future is going to be.
Yeah. And at this stage as well, this is where they're actually seeking for that respect and the acknowledgement of who they are as an individual, at saka yung views nila are important. So it's that open communication is really important at this age. Hindi gagana sa kanila yung gawin mo dahil sinabi ko. There's lots of that negotiation and listen to me, I listen to you, let's talk about this. Yeah, and this is the way wherein they can really appreciate that they are being valued as well by adults around them. Yeah. Cool.
Okay, so should I go to the next slide, or actually I have Cecil raising her hand.
Yes, questions, please.
Cecil?
Sorry, I just press it through. Sorry,
Okay.
wala ako sa lahat.
Okay,
Sorry.
so we'll continue with the next slide then. So this is the slide, the video from Nathan Wallace. Let
So,
me just see.
ibigyan
Should I
ko
play it? Okay.
Konting introduction. So, I found this, marami siyang mga podcasts, marami sa YouTube, hanapin nyo lang. Pero meron siyang sinabi about the teenage years because it is the year, yan yung phase na sobrang misunderstood. And it's really when they're trying to get to know themselves, their identity, and also sexual identity. That's the age. And so, ang ganda nung tinanong what are your top tips in raising a healthy teenager? It starts from 4 minutes.
Boarding school. No, that's just a joke. My three top tips for raising a healthy teenager. Number one would be don't look at your teenager in the middle of adolescence and think that's an indication of the adult that you're going to raise. Because actually being an adult is all about having a frontal cortex, brain number 4, the brain that controls your emotions, understands consequences, set goals, all the things that make you successful. And in the middle of adolescence, what adolescence is about is the fact that that frontal cortex is shut for renovations. So it's really unfair to look at a kid in the middle of adolescence when 90% of the time the brain that he's going to be in as an adult is shut down. You should look at your child when they're 11, and that's much more of an indication of who they're going to be as a teenager, because generally they still had some frontal cortex going on there. So 10% of the time they're going to have some frontal cortex. My advice would be give your attention to that 10% of the time and try and ignore the other 90% of the time when they're just being all emotional and they're shrugging their shoulders and they're rolling their eyes and they're sighing deeply. You don't need to give attention to that. That's their emotional brain. It's already got a turbocharger on it, so you don't need to help it. Right? The part that you need to help is that frontal cortex, controlling emotions. So if that's only there 10% of the time, try and give as much attention to that when it does turn up as you possibly can, and as little attention to the 90% emotions that you can. That'd be tip 1. Tip 2 would be it's all about communication, having a quality relationship with your teenager. So learn to reflect back or validate emotion before you offer strategies. Parents often, with the best of intentions, trying to help their teenager, go straight to problem-solving strategies for what they should do instead. You have to remember that 90% of a child's worldview or a teenager's worldview is emotion. So if you don't speak to that emotion first, 90% of their worldview, you just ignored them. You're not listening to them. So chances are they won't listen to you. So, children do as you do, not as you say. So if you want the kids to listen to you, then you've got to model that by reflecting back emotion first. So when they go, I got in trouble because this kid called me a name, so I punched him and got a detention, instead of you going straight to strategies and going, well, why didn't you go to the dean? Why didn't you go and talk to your teacher? Then they think you're nagging. Go to the emotion first. Wow, you must have been so angry. Then go to your strategies. How come you didn't go to the dean? By acknowledging that emotion first, the kid feels listened to. And if they feel listened to, they're way more likely to listen to you. So they are quicker tips, really are those too. So judge your teenager by who they are 10%, and the best of their behaviour is who they're likely to be as an adult. Validate emotion before you try and give the child any strategies. And my third tip for having a healthy teenager is don't try and stand over them, try and negotiate as much as possible. We talk about 3 different parenting styles. The literature uses these boring terms: authoritarian, authoritative, permissive, and they're hard to understand. I like Barbara Colorosso's terms, which is brick wall, jellyfish, backbone. They're the 3 types of parent. You can probably work out what type they are just from the description. A brick wall parent, shut up and do as you're told. Dad was traditionally a brick wall. No, shut up, let's do it. Jellyfish has got no spine, just wants to be friends with their kids, really wants their kids to be happy, and finds it hard to follow through on a boundary. And then the backbone style of parenting. A backbone gives you structure and support, but it is flexible. And that refers to the style that you're ready to get a healthy teenager. You want to have that backbone style of parenting. If you're saying, shut up and do as you're told, you will be home at 10:30. No negotiation, 10:30. The kid doesn't have to use his frontal cortex. He doesn't have to make any decisions. So he's probably not going to be a good decision maker. If you want your teenager to be a good decision maker and make healthy decisions, they need practice. So they need involved in those decisions. So it takes longer, but it's just the difference between saying you'll be home at 10:30 to saying, well, okay, this is the first time you've been out at a party that's, I know adults are supervising it, but what do you think is an appropriate time for me to pick you up? And when they're doing that negotiation, they might say 2 a.m., which was ridiculous, and then you've got to go, well, 9 p.m. But you negotiate, but that negotiation is using their frontal cortex. If that's your general style of parenting all the way through teenage years, when you're negotiating stuff, you've still got set boundaries. You're not going to let them stay out till 2 a.m., but it doesn't really matter whether it's 9:30 or 10:30 or 11. That negotiation is going to prepare your teenager well for adulthood. And all the research says that those are the teenagers that get the best outcomes, that turn out the best, are the ones raised under that backbone style of parenting. I mean, we all use all three styles in any one given day, but it's which style you are mainly. Like I said before, traditionally dads are brick wall and mums are jellyfish, and together you've got this, backbone. But now, we don't have those clearly defined roles anymore. So, yeah, we normally find we've got one style we particularly fall into, and we're trying to move towards the backbone style of our parenting. Those have been my top 3 tips.
Many parents had questions around sleeping. What are your tips for dealing with kids?
Okay na, Ahmed.
Ahmed, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Nathan Wallace talked about, the parenting style and that backbone parenting. So the authoritative. So sometimes you're taught, for a lot of cultures, they think that being authoritative is negative. Being authoritarian is negative. But when you're authoritative, it means you are, you have your boundaries, but there's still lots of that warmth and care for the child. And being an authoritative parent actually produces better child outcomes and better child attachment as well. Because again, with that negotiation,
Limits.
is the the ability and the time for you to be actually communicating. And if you look at the next slide, Ahmed, I think Nathan Wallace already mentioned about the roles of the adults. In his talk, again, I've put in there, negotiation matters. So pick your battle. So it's not about those emotions, it's about helping them use their frontal cortex during that time. But there's one role in there that, that's really important. That is to ensure that a healthy range of food is available for the children during that stage, because there is that growth spurt. And that's also a way of actually your child learning that actually my mom and my dad care for me. They are providing this. So it's all those subtle ways of telling them that I am here for you. I understand where you are coming from. I am just here. I'm ready to listen to you. Yeah. Yon. Maybe before we have do you have anything to add on this stage? We'll just finish until the next stage and we can have the discussion.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So
gusto mo ako na sa next stage?
Sige.
Kung kailangan mong umalis.
Yeah. I have to go at 4.
Yeah.
Sige.
So most of the next slide po, Amen. Thank you. Thank you. So, development of a human being, most of the theories that we'll see is all the way up to 24, 25. In fact, si Nathan Wallace nga sinasabi niya, you're fully formed as a human being until 30, 35 for males. Females are earlier. And it also just has to do with the brain development. In research, they've seen that female brain develops faster than the male brain, and because of those differences. And so, but we'll focus here on from 18 to 24. Next slide, please. So in this stage, they're really, so but at teenage years, we really want them to be able to develop a good moral compass. And yan nga yung, because they're looking at their self-identity, that's sobrang importante na may pakita natin at teenage years that we're there to support, or not just us. There are, other, let's say, organizations or places in your community that is able to provide you that support. Because once they get over the teenage phase, that's where you'd have, well-grounded adults, young adults or individuals, ready for university, ready for work, ready for life. And so yan yung adult or early adult years na tinatawag spiritual and moral independence. And you'll know because yan yung age na makikita mo talaga yung fruits of your parenting and all the love and support your family and the whole community has given that individual, because dyan na lumalabas yung mga successes nila, na able to be independent at work, kaya nilang to face different types of problems, whether it's career or family or relationship, because that's also the age some might get married in that age group. And so, sobrang importante, again, i-add ko lang yung sa teenage years na they're given that opportunity to be part of society, whether it's their church or may club or merong sporting group or other groups na they're able to, or mga volunteer opportunities, madami. Then, provide them that opportunity para pagka college na sila or nag-work na sila at young adults na sila, they be able to make those decisions based on really good moral compass and foundation. So yeah, and they'd be able to contribute to society. We may not realize it, but our values as parents and adults actually has a big impact on what these young adults or young people will do when they're already at work. And even yung mga experiences natin, siguro, di ba, if yung may parents tayo na very active in church, you'd be more inclined to be generous, or even if you're not as spiritual as your mom and dad, you're more inclined to do these things because of the background you have in your family. So dito mo din makikita na yung mga personal interests and their ability to really be a part of their society. Next slide, please. And as an adult role, I guess because adults na sila we were still there, even if our children are already adults, we're there. We want them to know that I'm always here for you. You can talk to me anytime. I respect your decisions. This is my point of view. And so, we want to treat them as adults already and be able to offer advice in a way na, it's not really overbearing. So,
Yeah,
there.
if I could just add, diba, yun nga, a lot of parents say, when their children are still very young, but I just want to be a friend to my child. And as Joey mentioned earlier, no, I am not your friend, I am a parent. And
I am a parent.
first phases, that's when your child needs you to be a parent to them. When they fourth stage, pwede na tayo maging barkada, because you have already set the foundations for them to become, independent. And again, that moral compass is already grounded.
Yes. And as a friend, we tell our friends when they make bad decisions. So, you can do that. But in a way that respects, anak, alam ko, naiintindihan ko yung decision mo yan. But ito yung, diba? Ito aking advice. And I guess that's it.
Yeah.
We have another slide.
I think there's just a summary.
More.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really important that the sensitive order or the sensitive stages,
That's true.
kailangan mamimit mo yon para maging successful adult yung child, yung anak mo. Because that's the foundation for the next. You cannot expect your child to become a responsible adolescent if, as a child, you haven't really developed that in them. So they are in, the transition really needs to be smooth for these children. Yeah.
And we know, sorry. And we can see that because hindi naman lahat ng adults have had a good childhood. Where your children are awfully lucky that you guys are here. You're invested in their lives, but not everyone's like that. And we've seen that. And that's why some adults seem to be very childish or, may mga complexes and never grow out of certain stages. And yeah.
Yeah, and what's really important is, you keep on learning because, at this stage, well, actually, I'm still struggling with this. And that's where, when Maria said how trauma actually affects our own perspective in the way we parent children, it's acknowledging what those traumas are and then moving forward from it so that you can really support your child. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, the role of family, school, and society is to offer a wide range of experiences to guide, strengthen, and to support the child from infancy to maturity. And then the next slide is only just a summary again of, of what we have discussed. Yeah.
So